The band was still playing when Carla stood up and clinked her fork against her glass. The lights dimmed just slightly, enough for the crystal chandeliers to cast long golden shadows across the ballroom walls. Her eyes sparkled, but not from love. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, once, when she walked into our bedroom with a box of donation clothes, my old shirts, my college hoodie, all folded neatly like corpses in a coffin. The look wasn't affection. It was triumph. To new freedom, she said, and the words felt like razor blades dragged slowly across my chest. The guests clapped, some awkwardly, others with warm, oblivious cheer. I saw our friends, people I'd known since we were in our 20s, look between us with confusion that they tried to hide with polite smiles. I knew that half of them would whisper in the parking lot later. The other half would text me, "Are you okay? What was that about?" Dude, that was weird. But I wasn't looking at them. I was watching Carla. She turned to me with this almost theatrical grin, held out a thick envelope like it was a birthday card, and said, "It's time." That's all. No emotion. No hesitation. Just those two words. I didn't even blink. 30 years. 3 entire decades with this woman. I built a company from the ground up while she raised the kids and kept our house looking like something out of a catalog. We had family game nights, Sunday grilling rituals, vacations to national parks where I took the same picture of her and the kids standing in front of every waterfall. I gave her everything she ever asked for, except maybe the right to feel bored. She got restless around year 25. Subtle at first. The silence after dinner got longer. The laughter less frequent. The compliments non-existent. I thought we were just settling into the quiet comfort of age. Turns out, she was settling into someone else's arms. At first, it was small things. A new password on her phone. Locking the bathroom door to answer a text. A new perfume, young, fruity. Not her usual. I didn't press. I wanted to believe it was a phase. A midlife itch. Maybe she just needed space. But space grew into distance. Distance into detachment. Detachment into outright coldness. I still remember the night I heard her laugh from the guest room. It was 1:12 a.m. I woke up alone again. Her laugh echoed through the hallway. Muffled, giddy. I tiptoed, stopped at the door, barely cracked it. There she was, phone lit up, face flushed, whispering, "You're bad. Stop." Then giggling like a teenager. I didn't make a sound. Just turned around and walked back to our room, lay down in bed with my eyes wide open until sunrise. My chest was tight. My fists clenched. But I didn't cry. I planned. That's the thing about betrayal. Once it settles in your bones, once it drills into the center of your stomach, you become calm. Not dead. Not numb. Just calculating. Cold clarity is a gift. That's when I started to collect. Timelines. Behavior shifts. Bank statements. And then DNA. One simple envelope. One test. One truth I had buried in the back of my mind for years. And now, in front of everyone, she handed me divorce papers with a smirk. As if this was her grand finale. I took the envelope without a word. Slid it into my inside jacket pocket. And in return, I placed a small, sealed white envelope on her plate. She frowned. "What's this?" "Your toast needed a proper gift." The music kept playing. The crowd kept chatting. No one noticed the storm cloud forming above her head. Her fingers hovered over the flap. Her lips parted. "What did you do?" I smiled. Not wide. Just enough for her to know. "You'll want to read it in private." I stood, adjusted my cufflinks, and looked straight into her eyes for the first time in weeks. She blinked. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. I turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, her voice, finally trembling, called my name. Just once. I didn't stop. The real show hadn't even started. Not yet. The cold night air hit me like a wall as I stepped out onto the marble terrace behind the ballroom. My hands were steady, but I could feel my pulse in my teeth. I didn't light the cigar I'd brought. I just held it, twisting it between my fingers, letting the bitter wind strip the last warmth off my skin. Somewhere inside, Carla was probably still sitting there, staring at the envelope. Maybe she'd opened it already. Maybe she hadn't. I didn't care. Not at that moment. All I could think about was that night 3 years ago when I almost asked her the question, the one that had been gnawing at me since our daughter Megan turned 15. She had Jake's chin. Not my Jake, her Jake. The one from the gym. But that was the problem. I'd seen that chin before, way before this Jake. The first time I met Carla's college roommate's boyfriend, some hotshot from Miami named Darren, I noticed it. Strong jaw, slight cleft in the center. Megan had the same one. And Darren? He was at our wedding. There's even a photo. Carla's in white. I'm holding her hand. And Darren's standing just 2 rows behind us, grinning like he knew something I didn't. I never thought much of it. Until one night, I opened our old photo albums to scan some prints from Megan's high school graduation video. And there it was. A series of photos from spring 1992. Carla in a swimsuit, laughing. Darren beside her. Carla leaning her head on his shoulder. She told me they were just friends back then. Said I was being paranoid. Said it was before us. But Megan was born in December 1992. Do the math. That's when I started to rot from the inside. Quietly. Invisibly. I didn't ask her. Not then. Because what was the point? It would blow up everything. The kids. The marriage. The life we'd built. So I swallowed it and told myself I was wrong. But then she started pulling away. Not just physically, emotionally. Like she was tired of pretending. And when I found the messages from Jake 6 months ago, it all snapped into place. She wasn't tired of me. She was tired of the mask. So I ordered the test. Swabbed Megan's toothbrush. Sent it in. Paid extra for express and confidentiality. The result came in a sleek, white envelope. No dramatic wording. Just a number. 0.0% paternal match. I sat in my car with that envelope on my lap for over an hour. Engine running. AC blowing. My hands clenched on the wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there and stared out at the street, watching people walk past, laugh, live their lives. And I knew this was never my life. Not really. It was a rented illusion. So I played my part. Woke up every morning next to the same woman. Made her coffee. Kissed her on the cheek. Took her to dinner. Paid for her car. Smiled at her friends. And all the while, I prepared. Tonight wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was the first domino. The silent strike before the quake. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Megan. Dad, what's going on? Mom looks pale and weird. Did you two fight again? I stared at the screen. My daughter. Not mine. Not biologically, but emotionally. In every way that mattered. She was my kid. But that didn't erase the truth. And Carla, she knew. Maybe not at first. Maybe not for sure. But some part of her had to know. You don't fake a life this long without slipping up. The doors behind me creaked open. Slow, hesitant footsteps. I didn't turn around. I knew they were hers. She stopped a few feet away. Did you really do it? She asked. Her voice wasn't cold anymore. It was flat. Hollow. Like something inside her had deflated. I turned. Looked her dead in the eye. I warned you, Carla. I told you the truth always finds a way to crawl out. She shook her head. You're not going to destroy everything over this. You still have a daughter. You still have a family. You. No. I said, cutting her off. You destroyed it. 30 years ago. And you kept destroying it every time you lied to my face and let me believe this was real. She blinked rapidly. Swallowed. Her lips trembled, but no tears came. That was always her tell. She never cried when she was guilty. Only when she needed to look innocent. I took a slow step forward. That envelope isn't the end, Carla. It's just the beginning. Then I walked past her, back into the ballroom. People smiled. Clapped me on the back. Someone handed me another glass of champagne. The band was playing Brown Eyed Girl. How perfect. She used to sing that to Megan when she was a baby. And now, every lyric felt like a curse. The stage was set. She just didn't know what act came next. The days that followed felt like watching a fire spread in slow motion. Carla didn't open the DNA envelope that night. I know because I watched her, from across the room, tuck it into her purse like it was just another bill to be dealt with eventually. She was still smiling at the guests, still pretending she had control. But I saw the stiffness in her neck. The way she started scanning the crowd, looking for someone, anyone, to reassure her that what she feared wasn't true. But there was no one left to save her from it. Not this time. By Monday, the messages started pouring in. Carla hadn't posted anything about the party on Facebook, which was already a red flag for our circle. But her friends? They did. Photos. Captions. Hashtags. Carla in red. Carla laughing. Carla celebrating her new chapter. And then there was the one photo that I knew would light the fuse. It was just a blurry, candid shot, me placing the envelope in front of her, her smile half-formed, and the caption from one of her old tennis partners read, "The moment everything changed. Wildest anniversary party ever." That was enough. By Wednesday, her phone was buzzing nonstop. I heard her on the patio that morning, whispering angrily to someone, probably Leslie, her best friend/gossip central, saying things like, "No, I haven't opened it yet. I will. I'm just not ready for drama." She still thought she could control the damage, that she could spin this somehow. She was trained for it. Carla could turn any story into a sob story about herself. She had done it for years. It's how she survived suburban life without feeling small. She made herself the victim of everything, even her own choices. But the thing about truth? It doesn't care how good your narrative is. Friday evening, I came home to find her sitting in the kitchen, alone, wine untouched in front of her, envelope torn open on the counter. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Who else knows?" she asked. Her voice was dry, like sandpaper dragged over stone. "Just you. In the lab. And the attorney I hired last month." I paused. "For the custody papers." Her head jerked up like I'd slapped her. "Custody? Of what?" "She's an adult." "I'm not talking about Megan," I said slowly. "I'm talking about David. He's still 17. Carla's eyes went wide. I let that silence sink in for a few seconds before I leaned forward and placed another envelope on the table. This one was thick, bound in red twine. A copy of the revised divorce filing, with full custody, asset division updates, and a notarized statement about infidelity backed by collected evidence. "I'm not playing your game anymore," I told her. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the packet. "You're trying to ruin me," she whispered. I tilted my head. "No, I'm just finally choosing myself." The way her face collapsed at those words, God, if I'd still loved her, it would have broken me. But I didn't. I loved the idea of her. The woman I married in my 20s. The girl who made me laugh on long road trips. The mother who cradled our kids in the hospital room while I held her hand. But that woman was dead, buried under decades of lies and shallow self-interest. "You're throwing away 30 years, she snapped. "You burned them," I replied. She stood then, knocking the chair backward. Her hands clenched at her sides. "You think this makes you powerful? Think this makes you righteous? You're no better. You lied too. You hid. You spied on me. I investigated. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to say something else, but nothing came out. She just stared at me, and for the first time in years, she looked small. Not sexy. Not confident. Just small. I turned away and walked to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water like it was any other night. Because for me, it was. She had wanted a new life? Fine. I'd give it to her. But not on her terms. That weekend, Megan came over. Carla wasn't home. She was at some spa retreat, trying to detox the truth out of her bloodstream. Megan looked tired. Not sick, just emotionally spent. She sat across from me at the table and asked, "Did Mom cheat on you?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked her, "Do you remember Darren? From college?" She furrowed her brows. "No. He came to our wedding." She shrugged. "Okay." I nodded, then slid my phone across the table. A photo. Darren in 1992, standing next to Carla, both of them in swimsuits on a beach. And beside that photo, one of Megan from her high school swim team. Same jawline. Same dimple. Same exact half-smile. She stared at it for a long time. "What is this?" she whispered. I swallowed. A truth I didn't want to believe. She didn't cry, but her hands curled into fists. "You're still my daughter," I said. "I know," she snapped. "But she's not my mother. Not after this." I wanted to say something comforting, but the truth had no soft edges left. Megan stood and left without hugging me. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew the next fuse had been lit. Not by me, but by Carla, years ago. Now, I was just the one striking the match. The first rumor hit the neighborhood like a car crash. By Monday morning, the phones were buzzing before the coffee finished brewing. Carla had always been the unofficial queen bee of our little gated slice of suburban paradise. PDA president 3 years running. Organizer of the spring galas. The one who always wore pearls to the grocery store and somehow made it look natural. But now? Now the whispers followed her like perfume. It started with a post on the private community board. Just a vague little line, but enough to spark fire. Some people really do save the best betrayals for their anniversary parties. Champagne and secrets, huh? That was it. No name, no detail, but everybody knew. Our town didn't run on facts. It ran on vibes, and Carla's were radioactive. I watched from the living room window as she walked to the mailbox, head held high like she didn't feel the eyes burning through the blinds from every direction. She still wore that tailored pink jacket she used for brunches, like it would shield her from the truth. She didn't know that Leslie, her ride-or-die gossip buddy, had already flipped. Leslie had called me Sunday night. No preamble. No, how are you? She just dove in. I always knew something didn't add up, she said, almost gleeful. She flirted with anything in khakis. Honestly, I thought you were the one cheating because of how smug she always acted. That hit me harder than it should have. The world thought I was the cheater. Because Carla painted me that way. Stoic. Reserved. Distant. But that wasn't who I was. That was who I became after years of being gaslit by someone who turned every argument into a monologue about how I wasn't enough. Leslie kept going. Said the gym trainer wasn't the first. Not even the second. Carla's been playing house with 3 different guys since Megan was in middle school. One of them was your contractor, Paul. Remember him? I did. He'd spent 2 weeks remodeling our downstairs bathroom. Always stayed late. Carla brought him lemonade in a sundress. I thought it was harmless. I was wrong. I didn't say much on the call. Just listened, letting the pieces settle in the back of my skull. One by one. And when I hung up, I didn't scream. Didn't punch a wall. I opened my laptop and emailed my attorney. The subject line was simple. Update to Asset Division. She's been unfaithful multiple times. The lawyer replied within the hour. Now, sitting in my kitchen, watching her walk back from the mailbox with that same stiff grace she'd always had in crisis mode, I almost pitied her. Almost. She opened the door, walked in without a glance, and dropped the mail on the counter. I could smell her perfume before I saw her face. Strong. Floral. Desperate. I need to talk to you, she said flatly. I looked up from my coffee. Said nothing. Her hands were trembling. Finally. The mask was cracking. I read the test, she continued, quieter now. And I get why you're angry. But we need to figure this out together for the kids. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the one that isn't mine, or the one you've been lying to every day of his life? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't do this, Nathan. Don't do this. The same line she used when I tried to confront her last Christmas about the late nights. The unexplained charges on her card. The hotel receipts she claimed were spa vouchers. She always made me feel like the villain for noticing. For asking. You don't get to invoke together now, I said. You burned that word out years ago. Carla stepped closer. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said, standing slowly, setting the mug down. It makes me done with you. And then I pulled out a folder from the drawer, labeled neatly, printed in bold. Subpoenas, character witness requests. She saw the names on top. Leslie, our neighbor Greg, her old friend Marissa. All people who had either witnessed her affairs or were dumb enough to spill them during wine nights. Her face went pale. You're going to drag me through court? No, I said, coldly. I'm going to walk through court. You're going to drag yourself. I'm just giving you the rope. She backed away like the words were heat. You're trying to ruin me, she whispered again, as if saying it twice would make it less deserved. No, Carla, I replied, stepping around her, my voice low. You ruined yourself. I just finally stopped cleaning up the pieces. She stood frozen in the middle of our kitchen, our once shared kitchen, like she didn't recognize it anymore. Like the walls had shifted and the floor no longer obeyed her steps. That night, she didn't come home. She texted David, told him she was staying with a friend. I didn't ask who, because I already knew. And the next morning, when Megan called and said, Dad, someone just sent me a photo of Mom kissing her trainer in the grocery parking lot, I didn't flinch. I just said, save it. The evidence was piling up, and my plan was just beginning. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't the gentle quiet of early mornings before the kids woke up or the still hush after a long dinner. It was vacuum silence, the kind that follows a blast. An unnatural absence of movement, breath, presence. Carla hadn't returned. Her closet stood half empty. A few designer pieces were gone, but most of her everyday stuff still hung in place like ghost clothes. Her jewelry box was open, and all the expensive pieces were missing, wedding ring included. I didn't touch any of it. Let it sit there like an open casket. David stayed in his room mostly. Doors shut, headphones on. I knocked twice the first day. No answer. So I stopped knocking. He needed space, and I understood that now better than ever. But on the third day, he surprised me. He walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and asked, "Did Mom really cheat on you?" I looked at him. 17 years old, taller than me now, his jaw tight, like he was forcing himself not to yell. I answered him the only way I knew how, with the truth. Yes. He stared at the glass in his hand. How many times? At least 3 that I know of. Might be more. He didn't react. No explosion. No scream. Just a slow nod, like he'd already figured most of it out, but needed confirmation from someone who wasn't lying to him for once. "She said you're trying to take me away from her," he muttered. "I'm trying to protect you," I said. "Not control you." He finally looked at me. "Are you saying I can choose?" "Always." That was the moment something changed in him. I saw it in his shoulders. They relaxed. Just barely. He left the kitchen without another word, but the door to his room stayed cracked after that. 2 days later, Megan came over again, without warning, without texting. Just rang the doorbell and walked in like she used to in high school when she forgot her keys. She stood in the living room, holding a manila envelope. "I did the test," she said quietly. I froze. "I went to the same lab. Asked them to match against the guy you showed me." "Darren." My throat tightened. "And?" She opened the envelope and pulled out the results. No drama. No speech. Just a silent handoff. I took the paper. Looked at the highlighted line. Probability of paternity, 99.9987%. Megan sat down on the couch. "I guess that explains some things." "You're still my daughter," I said before I could even think. "That doesn't change." She nodded, but her eyes were red. "I thought I had a normal childhood," she whispered. "I thought we were the kind of family that worked. Like, yeah, you and Mom argued sometimes, but I always thought it was just stress. I didn't realize it was decay." I sat across from her. "I thought the same thing." She wiped her face quickly. "Do you think she knew all these years?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes." She blinked. "She never said anything. She let you raise me. Let me call you Dad while he walked around like a ghost." "She didn't want the truth," I said, my voice flat. "She wanted control." Megan didn't reply. She just stared ahead, and for the first time, I realized how much of Carla's steel was in her posture, but none of the cruelty. "I want to meet him," she said suddenly. "Darren." I exhaled. "I figured you might." I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out another folder. I already tracked him down. Her eyes widened. "I didn't want to tell you until you were ready. He's in Tampa. Still works in finance. Divorced. No other kids." When I reached out, he responded. She took the folder like it weighed 100 pounds. Then, softly, "What did Mom say when you told her?" I smiled bitterly. "She doesn't know." "Why not?" "Because this time," I said, standing, "she gets to be the one left in the dark." The next day, Carla showed up. Not at the house. At my office. My assistant buzzed me. "Your wife's here." "Ex-wife?" I corrected automatically. Carla barged in before I could stand up. She was in full armor, hair perfect, heels loud, blazer tailored like she was about to give a TED talk on how to pretend you're not imploding. "You told Megan," she hissed, slamming the door behind her. "How dare you involve her in this?" "She involved herself," I said. "You lied to her for 23 years. I told her the truth for 1 minute." "You don't know what this will do to her," she snapped. "She's stronger than you think," I said calmly. "And she deserves to make decisions based on reality, not your fairy tales." Her hand slammed on my desk. "You've made your point, Nathan. You've embarrassed me, destroyed my credibility in this community, turned our kids against me. What more do you want?" I stood slowly, leaned forward until we were eye to eye. "I want you to feel it," I said. "What it's like to be gaslit, betrayed, and left alone in the mess you created. I want you to walk into every room and wonder who knows, who's judging, who's seen the photos." Carla's jaw clenched. "You were the storm, Carla," I said. All I did was open the windows. She turned on her heel and walked out without another word. And I knew then. The cracks were no longer invisible. Her perfect image was beginning to shatter. It happened faster than even I expected. By the time the following week rolled around, Carla's carefully constructed world had started to buckle under the weight of her own lies, and not because I pushed. I didn't have to. All I did was step aside and let the wrecking ball of truth swing. It started with the country club. I got the email on Wednesday morning. Subject line, change in membership status, Carla Remington. It was from the board. Formal, cold, and devastating in its brevity. Due to recent events and member complaints, Mrs. Remington's privileges have been temporarily suspended pending further review. No fanfare. No meeting. No explanation beyond what everyone already knew. She built her entire identity around that place: brunches, fundraisers, the tennis team. For her, the club wasn't a hobby. It was her platform. The stage she stood on to make the world think she was elegant, refined, untouchable. Now that platform had been pulled out from under her, and she was falling. 2 hours later, I got a text from Leslie. She lost it, screamed at the receptionist, called me a traitor. You were right about her, Nathan. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The collapse had begun, and I wasn't going to dirty my hands speeding it up. Meanwhile, David, my quiet, closed-off son, had started doing something I hadn't seen in months: talking. Not about feelings, not about the divorce, but just being present. He asked me about the car, about dinner, sat on the couch while I watched the game, and even made a dumb joke about Carla always cheering for the wrong team. That one landed hard. I laughed, but it was hollow. Still, it meant something. We were thawing. Friday night, he knocked on my door. She wants to meet, he said, standing there with his arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Carla. He nodded. Said she wants to explain things. I didn't answer right away. He leaned in, quieter. I want to hear her say it. I want her to try to lie to me now. I'm ready. That was all I needed to hear. I told him I'd go with him. But he shook his head. No, I need to do this alone. When he left, I watched from the window as he got into his car, backed out, and disappeared into the dark. I trusted him. What I didn't trust was Carla's desperation. And I was right to worry. The call came just over an hour later. Dad, his voice was tight. I'm okay, but... Mom went crazy. She screamed at me. Tried to say you manipulated her. Then she started crying and begging and telling me she was lonely. I stayed silent. She said if I loved her, I'd move in with her, he continued. Tried to guilt me into picking sides. Did you? No, he said quickly. I told her I'd stay where people told the truth. That hit me right in the chest. I'm coming home, he added. I didn't ask him anything else. I just told him I was proud of him. When he walked through the door that night, something in him had shifted. His shoulders were squared. His voice steady. The fog was gone. We didn't speak of her again that weekend. But Carla wasn't done. Sunday afternoon, Megan showed up with a folder in her hand and a look in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was 10 and someone pushed her brother off the swings. Protective. Furious. Determined. She's suing you, she said flatly. I blinked. Excuse me. For defamation, Megan clarified, slamming the folder down. Claims you're slandering her reputation, damaging her social standing, and alienating her children. I got this from her new attorney, her third one, by the way. They sent it to me by mistake thinking I still lived with her. I opened the folder. Standard legal threats. No real backbone. Just noise. Desperate noise. She's spiraling, Megan said. That DNA result broke something in her. She thought she could keep pretending forever. Thought no one would ever dare expose her. She's not used to consequences, I said. Megan crossed her arms. What are you going to do? I stared down at the papers for a moment, then looked at her. I'm going to end it. Not out of spite. Not even for revenge anymore. I'm doing this so she can't hurt us again. And that's when I made the call. I reached out to the investigative reporter I knew from a former client. Not to smear Carla. Not to go public with everything. But to prepare a record, an airtight timeline, documented evidence, witness statements, financial logs, emails, texts, everything. I didn't need the public to know. I needed the judge to. This wasn't about embarrassment anymore. It was about protection. About control. about setting fire to the last lifeline she had left and making damn sure it burned clean. Because the next time she tried to twist the truth, I'd be standing there with a match and a gallon of gasoline. And I wouldn't blink. The courthouse smelled like old wood, cold air, and too many secrets. I hadn't been there in over a decade, not since I handled a zoning dispute for the business. That time, it had felt distant, technical, clean. This time, it felt personal, dirty. Like every hallway echoed with the kind of betrayals you can't scrub off. The hearing wasn't for custody yet. That was still pending. This was just a preliminary session. A request to formalize separation of assets, freeze joint accounts, and set temporary terms. Nothing explosive on paper. But I knew Carla. She didn't play clean, even when she was cornered. She showed up 20 minutes late, dressed in black. Overdressed, actually. Like she was attending a funeral. Hair pinned high, face stoic, makeup layered on like a mask. If I didn't know her, I'd say she looked calm. But I knew the signs. She was unraveling quietly. Internally. And those are the ones you have to watch the closest. Her attorney was new. Young. Nervous. Probably didn't know half of what she was walking into. The judge, on the other hand, was the same old hard-nosed realist I remembered. Retired Army, 3 decades on the bench, zero patience for drama. Carla sat across from me and didn't meet my eyes once. Her lawyer tried to open strong, tossing out words like emotional sabotage, unfounded accusations, and reputational damage. She even slipped in the phrase malicious psychological warfare, which made the judge raise an eyebrow. Then it was our turn. My attorney didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. He just placed the folders on the bench one by one. Each labeled, each indexed, each full of black and white, time-stamped, indisputable truth, infidelity documentation, phone records, financial transfers to hotel chains, testimony from the lab confirming the DNA result, statements from mutual friends confirming separate residences and repeated deceit. No embellishment, just facts. Carla's jaw clenched tighter with every page turned. By the time the judge cleared his throat, her lawyer was shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "This isn't a tabloid scandal, Mrs. Remington," the judge finally said. "But it's quickly becoming one because of how you've handled it. I strongly advise your counsel to settle this with dignity. Because if this reaches a full trial, there's going to be nothing left of your privacy when it's over." Carla didn't move, didn't speak. Her hands stayed folded like she was trying to remember how it used to feel to be in control of a room. Outside the courthouse, I expected her to storm off. She didn't. She followed me to the sidewalk and stood there, just out of reach, like a shadow refusing to vanish. "Was this your plan all along?" she said, voice barely above the hum of traffic. I didn't answer. Not right away. She stepped closer. "You know what people are saying," she hissed. "That I'm unstable. That I lied about everything. That I used you. That I never loved you." I met her gaze. "Did you?" Her mouth opened. Closed. Nothing came out. "I gave you 30 years, Carla. I paid for your parents' bills. I sacrificed promotions to be home when the kids were young. I let you in arguments just to keep the peace. I built a life around protecting your image. I stepped closer now, and you torched it for a handful of side flings and a fairy tale about freedom. So no, I didn't plan this. But I'm not stopping it either." She shook her head, her voice catching now. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It makes me free from you." She stared at me, and for the first time in months, I saw it, the truth seeping through the cracks of her mascara and foundation. Fear. She was scared. Not of me. Not really. She was scared that the mask didn't fit anymore. That the woman she told the world she was the perfect wife, mother, host, friend was dead. And underneath? Just Carla. Not the brand. Just the mess. The next day, I got a call from Megan. "She emailed me," she said. "Said you're poisoning us against her." I rubbed my temple. "Did she say anything else?" "Yeah," Megan replied, her voice brittle. "She asked me if I'd testify on her behalf. If I'd say you were controlling. Manipulative." "And what did you say?" I told her she should be ashamed. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "I'm not," she said after a pause. I finally saw her for who she really is. That night, Megan stayed over. We didn't talk about Carla. We watched a movie, ate takeout, laughed about stupid things. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. And as I locked the door and checked the windows before bed, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night of the party. Stillness. Not peace. Not yet. But the storm was passing, and the eye of it had moved right over Carla. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the knock came. Not the light, nervous tap of someone asking for a favor. No, this was deliberate. 3 sharp raps, space just enough to announce, "I'm not going away." I opened the door. Darren. Gray hair, polo shirt too tight for a man his age, expensive sunglasses hanging from the collar like a trophy. He looked exactly how I remembered him in the photos, just older, softer around the jaw, but still trying to project the swagger of a man who thought he could walk into any room and own it. He didn't say hello. "Is she here?" he asked, scanning the hallway behind me. I didn't move, just stared at him. "Carla didn't tell you?" "She told me plenty, Nathan," he replied, slipping his hands into his pockets. "More than I needed to hear. But she didn't tell me the part about you calling my office." I smiled slowly. Didn't realize calling meant sending one email with evidence attached. No commentary. Just facts. He stepped closer, the suburban sunshine bouncing off the lenses hanging on his chest. "Why now? You had 20 years. "Because I only got confirmation last month." "And you figured you'd what? Ruin her? Blow up my life too?" "You blew up your own life, Darren," I said calmly. "I just showed my daughter the wreckage." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smirk. Not quite a frown. "She wants to meet me," he muttered. "Did you tell her to do that?" "No," I said. "But I told her she deserved the truth." She decided to meet the man who gave her his face, but not his name. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't know back then. Carla told me she was single. We were, 21? I never followed up. Never saw her again until years later, after Megan was already in the world." "You still didn't say anything. Would you have?" That stopped me for half a second. But only half. "No," I admitted. "But I wasn't the one who slept with someone else's fiancée." He looked past me now, I scanning the entryway like he was trying to understand the architecture of a life he never helped build. Then, quietly, "Is she really mine?" "Yes," I said. 99.9% sure." He nodded. Then, for the first time since he arrived, he looked small. "You think she'll hate me?" he asked. "I think she'll decide for herself. Something her mother never let her do." He swallowed and turned to leave. But before he got to the steps, he paused. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. I needed to see what kind of man raised my daughter. And he glanced back. She turned out better than I deserve. So, thanks." I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind him. Inside, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a door closes on something unfinished. I stood there for a minute, not moving, processing. Megan had asked to meet him on her own terms. I didn't push her. I gave her the file, the address, the number. But now that he'd seen me, spoken to me, I knew things were shifting again. I sat down in the living room and opened my laptop. 47 new emails since this morning. Most were case-related. A few were family friends checking in. One stood out. Subject: urgent, school email thread. It was from David's school counselor. I clicked it open. "Hi, Mr. Remington. We've been notified that a concerning email chain was circulated among the PTA board regarding your family situation. It includes references to your son's mental health, custody situation, and derogatory comments directed at you. We're obligated to inform you that the origin of the leak appears to be Mrs. Carla Remington. Please advise if you'd like to pursue formal complaint channels or wish for us to initiate a hearing internally. Best regards. Samantha Klein, LCSW." I leaned back in the chair, a laugh, low and bitter, rising in my throat. She just couldn't help herself. Even after everything, she was still trying to paint herself as the wounded party. Still trying to rewrite the story, twist the narrative, pull strings behind the scenes. But this time, there were witnesses. This time, the walls had ears. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "I want to move the custody hearing up," I said. "She's leaking private information to smear me. It's time to end this." He didn't hesitate. "Understood. I'll file an emergency motion by tomorrow." After I hung up, I stared out the window. Somewhere out there, Carla was watching the house burn from the outside and wondering how it happened so fast. But what she didn't know, what she never understood, was that the fire hadn't started with the envelope. It started the night she let another man into our home through a locked phone screen and a lie. The envelope was just the spark. Now the whole story was going up in flames. And I was done saving her from the smoke. The emergency hearing was scheduled in less than a week. Carla's lawyer tried to stall, of course. Claimed her client was under emotional duress and needed time to prepare mentally. But the judge saw through it. He'd read the email logs. He'd seen the screenshots from the school, the PDA threads she injected herself into with venom and half-truths. He even made a point to mention the phrase emotionally weaponizing her status as a mother. I sat in that courtroom and watched the last of Carla's leverage bleed out in slow motion. She didn't cry. Not once. She wore a powder blue dress, probably to look softer, more maternal. But her posture betrayed her. Her spine was rigid, her jaw locked, her fingers twitching under the table like she was squeezing invisible strings that weren't connected to anything anymore. David didn't speak. He wasn't required to, but his presence said everything. He sat behind me, silent, arms folded, eyes sharp, no longer confused, no longer caught between. Just waiting, watching. The moment the judge ruled in my favor, freezing her access to our joint accounts and granting me temporary sole custody pending the full review, Carla exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a decade. And then she laughed. A soft, bitter thing. Like someone who finally realized the game was over but couldn't admit she'd lost. As we left the courtroom, I expected her to vanish like smoke again. But she didn't. She waited by the elevators, arms crossed, a dead calm in her expression. "You win," she said as the doors opened. This wasn't a contest. She scoffed. Of course it was. You just hate admitting it. I stepped in, turned to face her. You started this, Carla. I just refused to keep pretending you didn't. The doors began to close, but she stuck her hand out and leaned in, voice dropping low. He'll hate you eventually, you know. They both will. It always happens. Daughters turn on their fathers. Sons blame you for everything. Give it time. I didn't say anything. Because that right there, that poison, was exactly what I was shielding them from. I let the doors shut. Back home, David didn't ask what happened. He already knew. But that night at dinner, he cleared his throat and said, I'd like to transfer schools. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere people don't whisper. I nodded. I'll take care of it. And I did. Immediately. Called a colleague who had connections at a private academy a few towns over. By the next morning, the transfer paperwork was in motion. But that wasn't the only move I made. Because while Carla was trying to smear me in PDA emails and private chats, I had quietly activated the one thing she never expected. An independent financial audit. Not of my business. Of hers. The boutique event company she ran? I'd been hands-off for years. Let her manage it. Never dug too deep. Turns out, I should have. The accountant I hired found discrepancies. Bookings that never happened. Inflated invoices. Payments made to vendors that didn't exist. And here's the kicker, a series of withdrawals made over the last 7 years. All leading to a shadow account under her maiden name. I stared at the report for a long time. Not surprised. Just sickened. She wasn't just lying to me. She was preparing to leave me. For years. Stacking money. Setting up her exit. Building a parachute while smiling in my face. That night, I printed out every page and put it in a leather folder. The final nail. The next morning, I texted her. Meet me. 1 hour. Neutral ground. She replied within 60 seconds. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. Quiet. Public. Neutral enough that neither of us could raise our voice without drawing attention. She arrived looking tired. Not made up. No armor. Just Carla, in her rawest, most exposed form. You said it was urgent, she muttered. I placed the folder on the table and slid it to her. Read it. She hesitated. Opened it. And I watched her face change. First confusion. Then panic. Then fury. You followed me? No, I said. I audited you. There's a difference. You had no right. I had every right. You ran that company under our shared name. Under joint ownership. You used it to siphon money without ever telling me. It was mine, she snapped. I built it. With my capital, I reminded her. And you're about to lose every piece of it. She leaned back, eyes burning. You're going to destroy me. No, I said. I'm going to let you destroy yourself. I'm just making sure the paperwork's in order when it happens." Carla's lips parted. Maybe she had a speech ready. Maybe a last-ditch excuse. But I stood before she could say anything more. As I left, I looked back only once. She was still staring at the numbers, still realizing just how far she'd fallen, and that there was no one left to catch her. I thought that would be the end of it. That once Carla saw the audit, once she realized there was no more bluffing left, she'd retreat, lick her wounds, fade from our lives like the lie she'd lived. But she didn't fade. She fought. Not in court. Not in any way that could be documented or challenged. She fought the way cowards fight, through whispers, shadows, and nods you don't see until they're already in your back. The first came a few days later, when David got called into the counselor's office at his new school. Apparently, an anonymous message had been sent to the principal, accusing me of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, even psychological grooming. Terms so grossly misused, they screamed desperation. The email was long, unhinged, filled with dramatic, florid language that didn't match any professional style. But I knew the rhythm of it, the turns of phrase, the way she capitalized the first word in quotes. It was her. I didn't say anything to David. The school was already skeptical. It was clear they saw the message for what it was. But I requested it be filed anyway, officially, just in case. Then Megan's phone started blowing up. Private numbers. Hang-ups. One text that read, "He's not who you think he is." She blocked them all. But it shook her. And when she showed me the messages, there was one detail I caught immediately. The use of our wedding date as part of the phone number in one of the accounts. Carla never forgot a date. She weaponized them. That was her signature. "She's unraveling," Megan whispered as we stood in the kitchen, our shoulders just barely touching. "I think she might do something stupid." "She already has," I said quietly. I didn't tell them what came next. Didn't show them the envelope that arrived at my office with no return address. Inside was a photo. Me. Sitting at that cafe with Carla. Taken from across the street. Blurry but unmistakable. And on the back, in blue ink, one sentence. "You're not the only one who knows how to collect evidence." No signature. No explanation. Just that cold, calculated threat. I wasn't afraid. Not really. But I was done playing the game by any silent rules. So I hired security. Not a bodyguard. A digital forensics team. They traced the photo's metadata. Located the image source, an old iPhone linked to an account that Carla had used for a second Instagram profile under a fake name. One she used, apparently, to spy on our kids. And on me. I brought that to my lawyer. This time, we filed a protective order. And that was the moment the scales tipped completely. Because she showed up at our door the next night. Unannounced. No car in the driveway. Probably parked a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention. She was soaked, rain falling in sheets, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the Carla I had known. And everything like the one I'd ignored. "I just want to talk," she whispered when I opened the door. I didn't answer. Just held it open a few inches and waited. She looked past me into the house. "Is Megan here?" "She's upstairs." "I need to explain." "No," I said. "You need to leave." Her lip trembled. "I lost everything. The club. My business. My friends. I get calls every day from people who won't even say why they're calling. They just hang up. My inbox is poison. My name is poison. You made it that way. I was lonely. You were selfish. I was drowning. And instead of reaching for my hand, I said, voice low, you reached for a stranger's zipper." She blinked, stunned. "I loved you," she said, like it meant something now. I closed the door halfway. "Then you should have acted like it before you burned the house down." But before I shut it, she pushed her palm against the edge. "Don't do this, Nathan. Don't shut me out forever. We have history." I paused, looked down at her hand. Then, calmly, "So does Chernobyl." I shut the door, locked it, and for the first time since she left, I didn't watch her walk away. I went upstairs, sat next to Megan on the couch, said nothing. We just sat there in silence, both pretending the house wasn't echoing from the knock that had just been silenced. Downstairs, the rain pounded the roof. But inside, it was finally dry. Carla could claw, could threaten, could sob. But she couldn't reach us anymore. The walls were sealed. And her world, once so golden and untouchable, was now crumbling under the weight of every lie she ever told. I didn't know what Megan had planned. She asked for one thing, a microphone. Not for revenge, she said. Not for spectacle. Just for truth. She was graduating with honors from her pre-med program, set to give a speech at the university's spring convocation. I offered to help her write something, but she shook her head. Said she already knew what she wanted to say. I showed up early that morning. Sat 3 rows from the front. David beside me, tie slightly crooked, jaw locked like he was daring Carla to show up. She hadn't RSVP'd, but I knew she'd come. Narcissists don't skip spotlight, even when the spotlight turns them dash. Sure enough, she arrived 15 minutes late, seated herself far to the right, alone, oversized sunglasses hiding whatever was left of her pride. Her hair wasn't done. Her outfit, cheap and wrinkled. She looked like a woman clinging to the last rope of relevance. Like someone who'd fallen from a very high place and hadn't quite hit the ground yet. I kept my eyes forward. Megan stepped onto the stage an hour later. She didn't wear anything flashy. Just a simple white dress under her gown, hair pinned back, minimal makeup. But when she walked to the podium, the room went still. She started off soft. Spoke about struggle. About resilience. About how medicine wasn't just science, it was truth. About how healing begins when people stop lying to themselves. And then, without pause, she turned to the elephant that had followed her to every class, every test, every late-night breakdown. My name is Megan. I am the daughter of a liar. The crowd murmured. A few gasps. But she didn't flinch. I didn't know it at first, she said, voice unwavering. Because she was good at it. She was charming. She wore her guilt like perfume, light enough to cover the rot. Carla was frozen. Megan's voice sharpened. I was raised by a man who loved without condition, without blood, and without ever being told the truth. He showed up for me when the one who gave me life didn't even care enough to give me truth. And yet, I still called her mom. I defended her. I excused her. Until I couldn't anymore. The room was silent. You could have heard a heartbeat crash. I found out the man I called Dad wasn't my biological father. And I didn't spiral. I didn't lose myself. Because he was still my father. Every memory, every sacrifice, every bedtime story, that was him. Not the stranger she cheated with. Not the man who vanished. Him. I felt David shift beside me. Carla's sunglasses were still on, but her hands were clenched white against her knees. Megan took a breath. And I tell this story not for pity, not for shock, but because the truth matters. Because in a world where people hide behind fake smiles and curated lies, someone has to stand up and say, this is what was done to me. So others don't feel alone. So the silence breaks. She paused. Then, Dad, I love you. My throat tightened. You are the reason I'm here. You gave me your strength, not your DNA. And I am proud to be your daughter. The auditorium erupted. I stood, because I couldn't not. Applause rained like thunder. Strangers turned to look at me with wet eyes and soft smiles. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Carla. She hadn't moved. Her sunglasses had slid slightly, revealing red eyes that didn't blink. She wasn't crying. She was crumbling, piece by piece. As Megan stepped down and the next speaker was called, Carla stood. She left through a side exit. Didn't look back. Didn't say a word. That was the moment I knew. It was over. Not just the marriage. Not just the legal war. Her power gone. Her story unraveled. The web she spent 3 decades spinning had finally caught her. And for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clean. Because truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it stands quietly on a stage and shatters the lie. The morning after Megan's speech, I woke up before the sun. It wasn't the dreams. It wasn't restlessness. I just woke. And for the first time in a long, long time, my chest didn't feel like it was hosting a war between rage and regret. There was silence. Not the dangerous kind. Not the heavy pause before another blow, but a cleared air. Like someone finally opened all the windows after years of smoke. I got up, made coffee, sat at the table where Carla once served me betrayal with a smile. I stared out the window at the lawn. The grass needed mowing. The hedges had overgrown a little. A robin hopped across the patio like it owned the place. The house felt real again. Mine. Not a stage for secrets or a prison dressed in Pottery Barn furniture. Just home. The phone buzzed. It was a message from my attorney. She's withdrawing. All motions. No contest on custody. No appeal on asset division. Full surrender. It's over. I sat there for a long time just staring at that line. Not because it surprised me. I think, deep down, I knew this was coming. Megan's speech had torn the last thread Carla was clinging to. That microphone hadn't just exposed the truth. It emptied her of excuses. She didn't have the energy to fight anymore. And maybe, for the first time, she understood she'd already lost long ago. Not just in court, but in the eyes of her children. The eyes of everyone who had believed in her. And maybe even in her own. She had destroyed herself trying to win. And I had survived by walking away. I walked outside, barefoot, coffee in hand, and let the sun warm my face. It felt earned. An hour later, David joined me. No words. Just sat beside me on the porch swing like we used to when he was 8 and afraid of thunderstorms. He didn't need comfort now. He needed closure. Think she'll ever say sorry? He asked. I thought about it. No. He nodded like he expected that. Then, softer, okay. Later that day, Megan came by. She didn't knock. She just let herself in and said, hey, like she'd done 1,000 times before this year, twisted everything sideways. We sat around the table, ate pizza, watched a movie none of us remembered the name of 10 minutes later. It was so ordinary that it felt sacred. At one point, Megan looked at me and asked, do you ever wish you'd never found out? I didn't answer immediately, because there had been a time I wished exactly that, when ignorance still wore the mask of peace, when the lie was intact and the family looked perfect on Christmas cards. But that peace wasn't real. It was a cage made of silk. I wish I'd found out sooner, I finally said. I wish I'd trusted my gut when things started to rot. But no, I don't regret knowing the truth. I regret how long I let the lie live in my house. She nodded. Me too. Before she left, she hugged me, longer than usual, tighter, and whispered, you're the strongest person I know. She didn't say it like a compliment. She said it like truth. After she left, I went upstairs and opened the box. The one I'd buried in the back of the closet. Inside were the anniversary cards, her wedding dress photo, a silver bracelet I gave her on our 10th year together, the one she stopped wearing when gold looked better with her tone. I took the box downstairs, sat in the backyard. One by one, I lit each piece. Not in anger, not in spite. As ritual, as release. The flames danced and faded, and when it was done, there was nothing left of the life I'd been forced to pretend was whole. Just ash. Just truth. Later that night, I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and wrote 3 lines. To the man who suspects but doesn't want to know. Trust your instinct. Silence doesn't protect you. It only hides what's already broken. I closed the file. Saved it. For what? I didn't know. Maybe someday, someone else would need to hear it. But for now, the storm was over. The lie was buried. And I, finally, was free.